Hello everyone, this is CounterYolo, bringing you another video in Star Trek Online. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about what in my mind would be the dream kind of ideal situation for a KDF and Romulan Republic Anniversary Bundle. A lot of this stuff for Cryptic, as they've described in the past, stuff like this takes anywhere between 8 to 12 months to do. So if we want to give them a proper critique or options for things to do things for this, we might as well give them stuff about it now. Unlike what other people have done, I'm actually going to be doing all the stats and types of things for these ships based upon what Cryptic has done in the past. Hence why there was a certain video last week I've been comparing all the different subclasses inside the game, including general averages for those subclasses, so that when I made this video, I could at least have some higher credibility in terms of why I was suggesting certain stats for certain starships. In this video, I will go over what we saw in the last Federation bundle in terms of the rules that they seem to be following for the different types of starships that they were adapting for the Anniversary bundle, and then we'll go into the KDF and Romulan Republic versions that I outlined for this video with the 10 starships in each one of those. Feel free to see the time links in the description if you want to skip around throughout the video. So to start off with, the rules that they use for the most part, they set the base cost at 30,000 Zen, but they had the worth at around a little bit over 60,000 Zen. This is with the assumption that every bridge offshore layout, starship skin, starship trait, and starship console were each worth 750 Zen each, for a total package of a regular starship with bridge offshore layout, skin, trait, and console being worth about 3,000 Zen. Also, as a general rule here, we're going to say that none of the legendary starships are going to be able to be used from the future. So if something is created post 2411, it's not going to be available in the anniversary bundles. So we're not going to use stuff from 26th, 28th, 31st century. We're not going to use stuff from around there. It has to be from the modern era or in stuff in the past. Generally, what they also said was that each starship would get a new layout, a new skin, and a new starship trait that would be account unlocked. And also they would get all the old skins, old starship traits, and old consoles. All those would be based upon character unlocks, though. You have to claim that ship for every single one of your characters in order to get those unlocks. What this basically does is it makes it so that if that starship is not available to in a different faction on your account, then you wouldn't be able to get those nice old traits and old consoles. Now, for the rough math here, you can see it down there. What it basically comes down to is that for this to be worth it, for that 30,000 Zen price, you basically need 50 old things between skins, traits, and consoles for the 10 ships to be on par with what we got from the Anniversary Bundle. Now, in this particular video, with the 10 ships that I chose for the KDF and the Romulan Republic, it turned out that the KDF one was not worth it, but the Romulan Republic one was. So what I'm basically going to be doing in this video is I'm actually going to be breaking the new console rule here, and that each of the starships are going to get extra consoles that are either old consoles from other ships that thematically work with those ships, or they're actually going to be brand new consoles and traits for those bigger ships as well. So when you see extra green consoles, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about for this video. As for the 4 different types of starships, there technically were 5 because there was also a low-buy starship, but the KDF and the Romulan Republic don't really have low-buy starships. All the low-buy starships in there are pretty much either cross-faction entirely or they are Fed-specific. Yes, there are a couple of Klingon and Romulan temporal ships in there, but it's really just that they are that they're Klingon or Romulan variants of the Federation ship. So I really count those as more just a collection of cross-faction ships with just a different skin for each one of them. What we see with the 4 main types that are prevalent through everything is that fleet starships generally got a significant buff, and that basically anything could change on them to make that buff apparent. For C-store only starships, aka the flagships, they generally were pretty much neutral. They got a slight buff. The subtype didn't need to change. They were only allowed to have a commander specialization only. They did not get access to a second specialization seat. And the bridge offer scene had to be thematic based upon how the ships worked in the past. Both based upon the tactical version primarily, with some additional flavor and bridge opportunity based upon whatever starship that was canonically the flagship for that faction. Like the Enterprise Ev was canonically a science variant of the cruisers, so it got a Lieutenant Commander science seat. But the board askew for the KDF is canonically an engineering starship, and obviously the Scimitar for the Romulan flagships is a tactical ship. So that one just is going to be a straight tactical layout. As for the lockbox and promo pack starships, they need to be an overall nerf in terms of overall stats. However, just because it's an overall nerf doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have to be DPS positive overall with the changes. It's why some people, when they looked at the stats for lockbox and promo ships, they're like, well, I don't care, that's still an overall buff for me. And that's true. A lot of those changes end up being buffs in terms of damage for a lot of different playstyles, or end up being a nerf to one playstyle, but a buff to another playstyle inside the game. Notably, for instance, the Kelvin Timeline Heavy Command Cruiser was still a decent torpedo platform and tank platform, and it changed into a platform that was better for energy-based weapons, or direction energy weapon builds. Generally speaking, though, most restrictions came with promo ships. They needed to be a nerf. The subtype generally couldn't change. The specialization did need to change, and those specialization types had to be Commander Special Seat and Lieutenant Special Seat, and had to be the exact same specialization between those two seats. The rest of ships could have different specializations between their commander and their other seat, but promo ships had to have the exact same for the two. These are going to be the 10 ships and their rough categories with Fleet, C-Store, Lockbox, and Promo that we're going to be going through in this video. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the KDF version first, and then we'll get into the Romulan one a little bit later. And these are the 10 ships right here. As you can see here, in my feelings looking through them, I didn't decide to put any of them to have Commander Temper Operative. A couple of them do have Temper Operative as their second seat, but and obviously the science version, I kept on debating whether it was going to be Temper Operative or Miracle Worker. I still kept on thinking about it further, and thematically, it just made more sense in my mind for a KDF ship to be Miracle Worker if it was going to be if it was going to be a science ship. They're probably going to have more durability on their ships than what's my science vessel from the Federation is going to be. So in my mind, it made more sense to make that ship a Miracle Worker ship as well. Several of these ships have been modified to have Commander Tactical, because in my mind, if we just have a bazillion Commander Engineering, that's not going to be that exciting for the KDF. And also, whenever you consider that the KDF as a faction in general is the most neglected in terms of its player base, it's got the smallest player base in general of all of them inside the game too. I feel that especially we need special ships here that are special in their own ways and are not available in any other way to the Federation side, so that people are more interested in actually playing a KDF captain. So yeah, a lot of these ships are going to be powerful, or are going to be slight nerf but strong alternatives to a lot of promo pack starships that are out there right now for a couple of the popular DPS metas inside of the game. So if you're wondering, well, that ship seems super powerful, that's why. The KDF is going to be my exception here to say it might be an actual overall buff even for lockbox and promo ships, but considering that the KDF are neglected anyway inside the game, I feel that that's okay to do. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. The Nekvar, which is the modern version of the TOS D9, by the way, it's another one of those commander and engineering ships that is basically just the Fleet Galaxy, but the KDF version. And I was like, well, the Fleet Galaxy kind of sucks, and I wanted something cooler and more interesting for the KDF to fly. So I thought it'd be more interesting to switch one of its lieutenant commander engineering and its lieutenant tactical around, so that it has commander tactical with 2 lieutenant commander engineering. Make the commander tactical intel, because intel is always cool for KDF, and we're making lieutenant commander be pilot, so that it can synergize with its single hangar bay. And the one hangar bay commander tactical starships are called Strike Wing Escorts inside of this game. However, the higher HP ones generally are warships and destroyers for the escort class, so I thought it'd be fun just to make a strike wing warship inside of anyway for this particular ship. So it doesn't have an experimental weapon, instead it just has an extra rear weapon. And it's in terms of its raw hull and shield stats, whenever you do the raw ratios of converting the fleet Nekvar over to a tactical ship, that's where it ended up getting pretty much. It was a little bit lower than that. I've decided to put up a little smidget, but that's basically the stats that it end up being, and it's not out of the question. It just, to me, for a heavier ship, those stats are still fine, so especially for a commander tactical ship with one hangar bay. The Starship trait there's pretty lackluster that I decided to put on this particular ship. I couldn't think of a good trait to pull homage to to mirror Worf. Calling back to that DS9 episode where Cisco went over to the mirror universe and helped the Resistance with making their version of the Defiant work properly and fight against this ship. Having some sort of trait that pays homage to that would be pretty cool. And of course, we have the TOS D9. It's a dreadnought battlecruiser. Normally, from Lockbox, most of the ways that I kept on thinking about it for specializations just seemed like buffs to this ship, so I changed it to a dreadnought carrier, and made a commander command to appeal to torp builds to make it so this would be a count unlock alternative to the Zenkethi Zentar from Permopacks, except the Zentar is Commander Miracle Worker, Lieutenant Commander Command, so Zentar would be better than this ship, but I still think that this ship would still be a fine alternative, and it is, a KDF looking starship. So I thought that would be pretty cool. The starship traits I decided to put with this needs of a few. Basically makes it so that your concentrate firepower doesn't get, removed by someone else putting concentrate firepower down. It's so annoying. On my side torp builds that I've experimented with concentrate firepower, that you put down concentrate firepower 3 and then someone else puts down concentrate firepower 1 on the same target right after you. And you're like, really? Come on, dude. So, it'd be fun to have a trait like this. I'm not sure if it necessarily need to be put on your ship, but it'd be fun to have a trait like this. Basically says, okay, for my own sanity, I'm going to put down concentrate firepower on this really high HP board cube, and I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about allies messing this up. I can place it down and be fine. Anyway, that was just my idea for a new trait. Now, if you wanted to go full on DPS, in terms of torpedo builds, I feel that the Burrell Bird of Prey is the way that we should be going. In terms of raw stats, I did tune down the stats on this particular ship because in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, turns especially with firing torpedoes from a battle cloak, the Burrell is the ship for that, and we don't really have a lot of incentives right now inside the game to fire from a battle cloak. Because of that, the way that I've tuned these stats, this is supposed to be the best DPS glass cannon starship inside the game. It's got 5 weapons in the front, Commander Miracle Worker, Lieutenant Commander Command, with those really low stats, so that plus Raider flanking, plus getting the ambush bonus from the battle cloak that this starship would be giving you, that I decided to invent and make for this ship. That it would be it should be one of the higher DPS torpedo starships in the game, but it's high risk, high reward. If you mess up, then you immediately get blown up and you die. The cool thing for the new skin for this particular starship that I was thinking of as well, from Star Trek 4, just a fun thing in the fandom is that the size of the Burrell changed constantly throughout the movie. So I thought it would be fun if also for a skin, instead of having a new skin, we'd be able to have that size scaling bar, the one that we know exists because the Vengeance has different scalings inside of our game in Star Trek Online. It'd be fun to actually have access to that bar itself. Maybe to a couple of preset sizes, be able to be like, hey, here's this moment's size, here's this moment's size, here's the side, the canonical size when it's fighting the Enterprise A. You know, it'd be fun to have a couple of different sizes of the Brill available for us to fly, just as a fun alternate skin option. And I think it's something that they could probably make work. They probably have to add a little bit in the work instead of an actual making of a skin. They'll be adding just that interface available to players. Just a fun idea for real Cryptic. As for the Kevlin Timeline D4X, again, this was another ship that every way I could think of that would be modifying a specialization just was a flat-out buff to the ship. So I changed its subtype to the frigate subclass instead of the raider subclass, which does give it an extra weapon, and it does increase its base stats a little bit, but you're now stuck with Commander Engineering. So your overall DPS potential is going to be a little bit lower. But I decided to give it Commander Intel so that we could enhance the Battle Cloak from a regular Battle Cloak to an enhanced Battle Cloak, which I thought would be fun and cool as well. For the Starship trait, I decided to modify Kinetic Magnet so that it wouldn't prematurely end after a certain amount of damage had been dealt. It'd be really cool if Intel becomes another alternative for torpedo builds. And I think Kinetic Magnet being buffed would be a way to do that as well. Anyway, now for the board askew. I'm probably gonna be talking about this one for a couple of minutes. For this particular ship, if you actually read up on the lore blogs, or blogs anyway that talk about the Cryptic designing the tier 6 versions of the board askew, what you'll learn is that they started with the engineering variant, and then they made the science and tactical variant based upon the engineering variant, which makes it very clear that the board askew is meant to be that the canonical board askew is meant to be an engineering starship. The Enterprise F is a science starship. The board askew is an engineering variant on a cruiser. So, in terms of its seating, but just like the Enterprise F, for this particular ship, we're going to have its seating being primarily the tactical version, with Commander Engineering and Lieutenant Commander Tactical. And then for the other Lieutenant Commander seat, because this is an engineering starship, it's gonna also be Lieutenant Commander Engineering. For the Commander spot itself, because the board askew's tactical version has a base of 5 tactical consoles, I thought it would be cool and fun to say, hey, what if we had this ship actually be one of the best broadsiding DPS starships in the game, and actually had it be Commander Miracle Worker, for it only having 1 specialist seat, being able to have 6 tactical consoles on your ship, plus access to the flagship consoles, I think would be a pretty cool and strong opportunity for us in the game. So basically, if you wanted a more higher HP and easier ability to tank with Commander Miracle Worker available to you, this would be a solid option as well inside the game. Maybe not necessarily as strong as like the Fog War Juggernaut, but it would be a nice option, and you'd also get a hangar bay and a couple of cruiser commands too. So that's what the ship is. It's basically the Enterprise F, but Lieutenant Commander Engineering instead of Lieutenant Commander Science. It's Commander Miracle Worker instead of Commander Command. Yeah, that's basically it. It's new Starship trait. I wanted something that, for a lot of newer players that are just struggling to get through the missions at all inside the game, would have a super slow stacking damage multiplier that, you know, if you're stuck in this thing for like 5-10 minutes, they eventually have so much damage that you eventually be able to blast through stuff anyway. So that's what this thing is. If you're for some reason stuck in a mission fighting something for 15 minutes, which is what this would stack up to, that you would have an extra 900% crit severity. Most TFOs don't last that long, and this will also have the limitation that the moment that you exit combat and exit red alert, that the stacks would all go away. So this would not be something that would be used in TFOs. It might potentially be used in PvP maybe, but if PvP actually lasted that long, who knows? I think this is something that's more for PvE for newer players that are struggling just to get through the missions. But yeah, that's the concept for that Starship trait and why it stacks so slowly. For the sarcophagus, it's another situation Commander Tactical with high HP, we run into the same issues that if we just add a Commander Special seat to this ship, it starts to feel really strong versus the regular lockbox version. So we're switching it to the other high HP tactical ship, which is, in this case, it'll be the Juggernaut because the lockbox version is a Dreadnought carrier. For this ship, it's going to be another Commander Tactical Intel. And I decided to put the Lieutenant ability to be Temper Operative. I guess I could have made it a Takuma Battle Cloak instead of Takuma Cloak. Especially because this is a Juggernaut with really high HP. I thought it would be fine just to leave it as a regular cloak instead of upgrading it to a Battle Cloak. As for its new Starship trait, I was initially going to call it the Unassimilated Module. Kind of like a play on the assimilated module from the Omega reputation. But then I remembered, oh yeah, in Star Trek Picard, liberated Borg are called XBs there. So just calling it an XB module I thought would be a cool homage to Picard. For this particular Starship trait, all of your consoles and all of your traits, including Starship traits, are 10% more effective if you're not in a fleet and are not using any fleet items on your Starship. This is a trait that I feel will be decently strong, especially for newer players in the game that aren't part of a fleet or, you know, don't have enough resources yet to be able to afford a lot of fleet items, and they'd be able to still be able to put a trait like this on them, and the rest of their traits that they have are going to be a bit more effective. This is definitely more for an early to mid game type of Starship trait. You wouldn't use this in the heavy end game, but it'd be a decent Starship trait to use nonetheless with other stuff that you might have on your Starship. As for the Vokuv carrier, there is going to be a slight buff to this thing. We don't have a tier 6 version of this, so I've got some kind of filler things over on the right in terms of ideas. I don't have names for them just because they're just ideas of things to add. 6 weapon 2 hanger carriers are really weak inside the game right now, and so I did add a PDF of a video I decided not to record, talking about some things of how I would adjust the different subclasses inside of the game. In that PowerPoint presentation, I did talk about a concept called a battle bridge that I thought would be cool to add to 2 hanger carriers that have only 6 weapons. That basically gives some very high incentives to fly frigates inside of them. A lot of the other carriers inside of the game, for the most part, for highest DPS, you're generally going to be flying fighters. It's kind of unfortunate with how different traits really incentivize you to fly fighters. We really need extra consoles and traits that incentivize actual carriers to fly, you know, the special things that those carriers can actually fly, which are frigates. A lot of your other carriers, even the 2 hanger ones, cannot fly a lot of the frigates that are available inside of the game. And so it'd be cool to have, you know, the specialized carriers that can have access to some of those special frigates to fly them, and they would feel really, really nice. For the Vokuv in particular, I mean, because 6 weapon 2 hanger carriers were initially designed inside of this game not for it to be optimal, but for it to be fun. And now we're starting to approach a time in the game when people are trying to make more optimal builds of these things. I honestly don't know the exact meta that it's going to end up forming eventually for ships like this. I would imagine within the next year or so, Cryptic is going to start to nail down how they want these ships to actually perform. For now, for placeholders for this video, I decided to make it Commander Science Miracle Worker because Miracle Worker is useful pretty universally for everyone. An extra console to enhance whatever is really nice. Lieutenant Commander Tactical for whatever, and then Lieutenant Commander Engineering Intel because there's some nice Intel stuff in there too, and Intel's seems thematically useful for a lot of KDF stuff. For its Starship trait, I'm just calling it Legendary Carrier, and that frigate pets get a lot of extra HP really quickly. There's probably something better that could be there to make frigate pets even better. There's a lot of stuff in the game that's good for all pets. I want stuff, especially for 2 hanger carriers, that specifically makes frigates really, really good. So yeah, that's basically just my little couple of cents on this particular slide here. As for the Kelvin Timeline D7, Now, for those of you all that recall from my video in which I talked about this starship when it came out, um, this is one of the unique ships with Commander Universal, and because of its base stats, you could put Commander Tactical on it, and it would feel like an actual destroyer. And if you put a Commander Engineering, it would feel like a battlecruiser. It honestly would. But if you put Commander Science, it still wouldn't truly feel like a science vessel. And so, and especially since Kelvin Timeline is evidently the ones that can change the most, as we saw with the Kelvin Timeline heavy cruiser changing to an Intel battle cruiser. I thought it would be okay to make the Kelvin Timeline D7 into a science spearhead. Now for KDF, I thought Science Warship as a phrasing made more sense than Science Spearhead. It's more menacing. I also thought it'd be cool to make it 5 weapons in the front and 2 in the rear instead of 4 in the front and 3 in the rear to make more distinction for the KDF, and giving it higher mobility, but at the cost of a little bit lower hull that the crossfield would normally have otherwise, as kind of some extra differentiation and consolation there. This was the ship that I initially thought should be Commander Science Temper Operative, but then thinking more about it, I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, KDF seemed more of the either hit and run or stick it out and fight forever. And so, and Temper Operative seems more in the middle instead of one or the other. And so, I don't know. In my mind, I just kept on thinking about it over and over and over again, and Commander Science Miracle Worker just made more sense, and making a Lieutenant Commander Temper Operative as its other seat there. Definitely, either way, it needed Lieutenant Commander Tactical, just makes sense that way. And then Lieutenant Universal and Ensign Universal there to round it out. Of course, it'd be cool if it was, a Science Destroyer, and you would get that extra experimental weapon if you activate tactical mode, but I mean, it's fine regardless. I think this is still going to be if they made a ship like this for the KDF, it would be very strong and very useful for them. They don't really have a lot of science options to them, frankly. They have some Gorn ships from the multi-mission bundle, and then they have that one science vessel. I can't remember its name off the top of my head, but it's basically the Fleet Sutherland, but the KDF version that's got a little bit higher hull HP. Other than that, we really don't have true modern versions of the KDF science starships. Yes, we do have that recent one from the Discovery timeline or Discovery era, but it doesn't have a modern skin to it. So yeah, for modern skin science starships, we really only have one that's actually only one real KDF starship. So having another one would be cool. Even if it is a Kelvin Timeline version. The new Starship trait, Power Science for this one. Again, it's another thing with Commander Science Miracle Worker that there aren't a lot of really, truly standoutish ones in Miracle Worker that are, hey, if you're going to do science, pick this for Miracle Worker. And so I thought it would be cool to just pick a power in there and say, hey, pick this power and pick this trait, and it buffs your exotic damage further. So I decided to pick at random Overwhelm Power Emitters. It does a little bit of extra damage, so I thought that would be cool. I also put in Feedback Pulse because Feedback Pulse has been nerfed so much that just having it there as just a battery for extra exotic damage, I think would be fine. I don't think that would push it over so much that people start doing Feedback Pulse tanking DPS builds again. That was a mess back during that time, but yeah, I think that's how I think they should make a KDF science warship, but I don't know. That's just my opinions here. As for actually the Discovery D7, I know that I said in earlier in this video that there shouldn't be stat adjustments that are significant for promo ships, but I'm giving the ship commander pilot. And whenever you're making a ship commander pilot with high mobility, you honestly need to lower the stats. It's just kind of like a general rule of thumb with it. If it's commander pilot, its stats are going to be lower. So that's what it basically did with this. Lieutenant Commander Engineering Pilot, Lieutenant Commander Science, Lieutenant Commander Universal Pilot, Lieutenant Tactical, and Ensign Engineering. So it's basically the same seating that you saw on the Legendary Discovery Enterprise, but the KDF version. And so yeah, that's basically what we're having for this particular ship. Again, part of the reason why I like pilots so much with hangar bays is because there's an ability called Reinforcement Squadron. The higher the rank you summon that, the more powerful the fun extra summonable pets that you get to fly around with for a little while. Like it lasts like around a minute or so when I was testing it with the pilots escorts anyway. But with flight deck carriers, you have 8 weapons with 2 hangar bays as an option. So in my mind, it makes sense with fighters to be able to do that. Now it is a little bit unbalanced in that if you had a commander pilot, you also have access to pilot abilities. So maybe it could be that you could have a commander pilot flight deck carrier that doesn't have pilot abilities, but you still get 2 hangar bays. Maybe that's a balancing move that they could do in the future. For this new Starship trait, I wanted another trait personally that would help support builds. So it's basically the ruin of our enemies, except instead of getting extra damage in cooldowns whenever you defeat enemies, it's whenever you defeat or assist in defeating enemies, you get extra bonus healing for 30 seconds. I think that would be pretty cool. It makes a lot of your healing builds scale more with more enemies that are being destroyed around you, which makes it easier to keep your allies alive whenever you're sending out healing abilities. In my mind, that makes sense. If we're going to have a very high scaling DPS trait, let's add another trait in the same vein of thought that gives you extra healing. It gives you the ability to heal others more as well. In my mind, that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't, but I mean, I'm not a game designer. I'm just a Star Trek fan who happens to like Star Trek Online. Lastly, for the KDF stuff, the TOS D7. This is basically just the TOS Enterprise from the Legendary Federation Anniversary Bundle. Commander, Engineering Merit Worker, Lieutenant Engineering Worker. I think this is fine. There's not really much that needs to be changed here. It's got battlecruiser commands because it's got a battle cloak. As for its new Starship trait, another thing I was throwing in more things for support. I think it'd be cool to have Torpedo Nanite Repair Payload be buffed in some fashion for those that want to do support builds. So be able to buff it into a spread to hit all the allies around you, or if you only have a couple, it hits those allies even harder for a harder heal. Just as a fun little trait. Just this with Commander Miracle Worker is going to make this a solid ship as well for those who want to thematically just fly the TOS D7, that they'd be able to as well. As for the Romulan one, here are the 10 ships. Technically, from a value standpoint that I said at the beginning, these ships have a lot more stuff going for them. However, we do have there are a lot more fleet starships here than for the other lists. So depending upon how you're adding up the numbers, these ships could be worth even less than the KDF one. With that being said, though, these ships are all warbirds, and warbirds are accessible to everyone, not just one faction or the other. So there does need to be something to be said that warbirds are more valuable because they're usable for all captains instead of just Federation or Klingon captains. And again, for a lot of the specialization seating here, it's roughly even between all of them. I've got a little bit more in command because I think command needs more love in the game. And there's also some stuff with enhanced battle cloaks that I'll be talking about later in this video as well. Of course, when it comes to TNG, the Derricks is kind of the iconic Romulan ship. In my mind, it made the most sense to make this a flight deck warbird. We don't have one of them right now. We do have the flight deck assault cruiser that is the Suilban Silic from the fleet. We don't have an actual 2-hangar warbird that actually has a full 8-weapon layout. So it'd be cool to modify this version to be able to have that. And I think that would honestly make sense with everything. It's going to have the abysmal turning that it's known for. So you might want to have more turning if this ship actually becomes a reality. It still is going to have the Lieutenant Commander Science seat, but it's also going to have pilot there. So again, you can have reinforcement squadrons there, to and a couple of other science abilities or other pilot abilities if you know that's more of interest to you than the science stuff there. But again, gravity well is still nice for a ship that's this slow to keep things in front of you if you really want to deal with the 5-3 layout that I suggest for the Starship. The new Starship trait, Tall Shiar Reinforcements. This is a callback to a mission in the Romulan storyline, actually, in which you finally confront Sharva and basically try to convince her to leave the Tall Shiar. I'm not going to give more context than that. If you know what I'm talking about, good for you. If you haven't, then play a Romulan captain and play through the Romulan storyline. It's honestly a pretty good story. The whole story going on through it, fighting Tovan's sister and trying to talk with Charva, and then that leading into why you're actually fighting the Alachi in the first place and why you hate them so much, into why you're in the whole Iconian War in the first place. It's a very fun story that ends with the Iconian War. With this particular trait, ambush point marker from the command specialization, as well as reinforcing squadron from the pilot specialization. The ship has both of the specializations available to you. Both those things will help you summon extra pets. So you use those things, you get more pets. And so with 2 hangar bays, more extra pets is more welcome. As for the Thry, which is the TOS version of the Derricks, it is another ship that I think is pretty cool. It's technically just called a Dreadnought Warbird, even though it is really a Dreadnought Warbird battlecruiser. I'm putting a battlecruiser here just for clarification. Dreadnought Warbirds can fall under several different bridge officer seating layouts in terms of its commander profession. It's a little confusing. It would be nice if Cryptic made it more clear. But I mean, Cryptic is starting to go in the direction of not really favoring Romulan ships as much as they used to, if they ever really did to a large extent beyond the expansion of Legacy of Romulus. But these are stats I basically came up with for this particular ship, with Commander Intel and Lieutenant Merrick Worker, with 1 hangar bay. So yes, in terms of raw damage, it's technically lower than the Derricks, but it's got better maneuverability. So if you don't want the abysmal 5 turn rate, this ship might be a better option for you. For its Starship trait, we're going to have 3 Starship traits in here that increase an energy weapon enhancement by 5 seconds. There are 3 different specializations with weapon enhancements that are alternatives to things like Beam Overload, Beam Fire at Will, Cannon Scatter Volley, Cannon Rapid Fire. But you don't really see them right now because all those other ones, those standard tactical ones, already are good, and they have traits that increase their duration to have them be at nearly 100% uptime if you build your ship right. And the specialization ones don't have that. So since they're perceived weaker and they don't last as long, no one really talks about them. So it'd be cool to have stuff like this that enhances them. So this first one is the Intel version, Energy Weapons Surgical Strikes, to have a trait that just increases its duration by 5 seconds. So people can start talking about these things again. As for the Haybacks, I'm definitely saying that wrong. It's another starship that does not have a tier 6 variant right now. So I just have placeholder things over there for a Starship Trading Console because it doesn't have a tier 6 starship right now. This is the starship that I also was changing from Commander Engineering over to Commander Science. In case you all didn't know, your auxiliary power on your starship also allows your cloak to be better against enemies so that it's harder for enemies to detect you inside of your cloak. It's really interesting that that's kind of the mechanic that they went with inside of this game, considering that there are so few Romulan warbirds that have Commander Science and a secondary deflector. It's not really the case for the most part inside of this game, which is really unfortunate. This particular ship I adjusted and made into a science carrier. And so 6 weapon science carriers do not have access to a secondary deflector. But again, in my PDF that I have put on my Google Drive, I have mentioned that instead of a secondary deflector, I think it'd be cool to have something else that enhanced frigates inside the game, and that, for me, is something called a battle bridge. And I talk about it more in that PDF. If you really want me to talk about it in a separate video, then I'm more than happy to do so and go into depth as to why. But again, it's Commander Science with 2 hangar bays, 4 weapons in the front. Very bad turn rate. Just like the Duradex, this thing is terrible with turning, and there's no reason to really change that. The new Starship trait, a life for a life. In my opinion, the absolute worst bridge officer ability in the entire game is an ability called Reroute Power from Life Support. It's an ability that gives you extra power, and it slows down the cooldowns under other abilities. It makes them recharge slower. Gaining extra power to do that is so not worth it in this game. It really wasn't ever that way, even when they launched the command specialization, and it's gotten even worse to today's standards. We really need something that makes that power worth it, or if they can't think of a way to make it worth it, they need to redo the power entirely to make it worthwhile for us players to actually use the ability. Because honestly, in my opinion, it is the worst ability in the entire game. Even Extend Shields has its usefulness. Just saying. So it's that ability and torpedo transfer warhead. In my mind, it would be cool to have those abilities reset the cooldowns entirely of torpedo high yield and torpedo spread. Having more traits that reset those cooldowns or have them go off for free, I think would be pretty cool. But that's just me. Those are the skins for stuff going on over there, and let's go on. Now, I had the Haypacks in the last slide because I wanted the Hanuman here. For those of you all that didn't pay attention in some of the past videos, this particular starship, it's Tier 5U variant, because there isn't a Tier 6 right now. This is the highest HP starship that is available from the fleet, that has 5 science consoles and 4 tactical consoles. If you actually want a starship with higher HP than this particular fleet starship at its Tier 5U rank, you have to go to the fleet Sutherland 3 starships, and you only get a smidget higher hull, and you lose 2 of your tactical consoles. So those particular starships, the fleet Sutherland and its Klingon and Romulan variants, are at about this hull ratio and shield ratio, but they have 4 engineering consoles, 5 science consoles, and 2 tactical. And they don't even get a full commander science temper operative seat. They have a lieutenant commander temper operative seat instead, which honestly sucks versus a lot of modern stuff in the game today. So I think this ship is honestly very, very noteworthy in that right, which is why this ship is in the legendary bundle here for me in my personal list. For its seating, it was also a decently maneuverable ship back there, so I think it should be fine for it to be that here. Commander Science Miracle Worker with a Lieutenant Commander Command. This does make it distinctly different from the Legendary Glenn. Now, instead of Commander Science Temper Operative, it's Commander Science Miracle Worker, so that you still are able to have, instead of the Temper Operative abilities, you have an extra console to get extra damage that way instead. You still get Torp Spread 3 with this Bridge Officer layout, and you get a Battle Cloak. As for the Starship traits, this will give a buff to 2 different abilities that do basically the same thing, which is you strip away all of your shields to get a lot of extra hull regen, either strictly for yourself or for the rest of your entire team, as well as extra temporary HP. Needs and amenities for your whole team, and that one is from the command specialization. Reroute shields the whole containment, which is from the Miracle Worker specialization, is mainly just for you. I thought it'd be cool to have a trait that basically said, hey, if you're going to use either of those traits anyway, slot this trait, and you'll give your whole team extra haste and recharge speed on their torpedoes, as well as extra hull and shield regeneration. I think it'd be cool to buff those. Honestly, in the state that those things are at, basically almost no one uses them. I commented on a couple of people's posts when they were using those things because I'm like, hey, it's cool someone is actually trying to use these cool abilities. Because I've even tried to use them from time to time on some of my tanks. And it's fun. It's not optimal, but it's fun to use them. And I think it's cool to be able to promote alternate playstyles to to do inside this game to make it work well in advanced and elite content. Now for this particular ship, this one definitely needs a lot of love. Unlike the other two starships that you get the trait emergency weapon cycle from, this ship is a 4 weapons in the front and 4 in the rear, with the experimental weapon being one of those rear weapon slots. The other two variants, the Arbiter and the Kirk, both have 5 weapons in the front and 3 in the back because they are just standard battlecruisers. As thus, you basically never see a fleet Mogai or Valdor or Morgu really ever flown. Because why pick one of those when you can just pick one of your ally starships that is generally considered better for cannon-based builds inside the game, which is true. So for the legendary version here, I think it'd be cool to give it what it really should have had from the beginning, which is 5 weapons in the front. And as for its seating, I think it should be a pretty good starship with Commander Miracle Worker and Lieutenant Commander Intel, so that it gives you a reminiscent feel of a certain other ship called the Valmore Juggernaut, but it's got a lower hull and it's got a battle cloak. So you could think of this as a little bit weaker but budget version of a Valmore Juggernaut. It's more maneuverable, but it has lower durability. And you still get emergency weapon cycle and the shield absorber frequency generator for your entire account. Now, as for the Starship trait, I definitely admit that this trait would be way too powerful. The way that I have it listed here of having subnuclear carrier wave steal all buffs from a single target. Maybe just a couple of buffs based upon the rank of subnuclear carrier wave, of instead of just eliminating those buffs, but also taking them for yourself, would be a pretty cool mechanic. If you time it right against the Borg Diamond, that would be pretty funny. I don't know. I think it'd be cool just to have something like that. More fun abilities and more fun traits to do funny, weird things with different interactions inside the game. I mean, seriously, like whenever the Borg lockbox came out, there was a lot of people trying to see like, I wonder if I could assimilate this thing or this large thing or this large thing, and then they would post pictures and showing that off, and people were giving it lots of upvotes. Yes, Cryptic, it doesn't have to be optimal. If it's something that's fun, players are going to like it. Whether it's actually optimal or not, there is a good portion of the player base that if it's fun, they'll buy it. Anyway, as for the Scimitar, this ship I changed from just a regular Dreadnought Warbird to a Dreadnought Carrier Warbird. What this does, by the way, is it gets rid of one of its rear weapons to give it a second hangar bay. And I gave it Commander Intel and gave it most of the standard seating that you would expect from the regular tactical version. That's basically what this ship is. As for its trait, it doesn't synergize with its bridge officer seating. I needed some other trait to increase the duration of energy weapons exceeded ready limits by 5 seconds, which is a Miracle Worker seat ability. I was initially conceptualizing to make this commander attack Miracle Worker, but it just seemed too strong to me. And so I decided to make it Intel instead. But I was too lazy and trying to figure out where to put this trait. So I left it here. It probably works better on a different starship to earn it, but I just left it here. But still, to have a 5.2 carrier, tactical carrier with 2 hangar bays and such, and a battle cloak would be pretty cool and unique and different. This the Realm of the Republic does have a science carrier from lockboxes, the Talaru. but it's only 6 weapons. So to have a 7 weapon variant available to them and also available to everyone, because it's a warbird, would be pretty unique as well. As for the Fayette, this is one of the ships that, if you actually get the fleet version, because it is Commander Intel, it would have access to an enhanced battle cloak. But with this version, we're changing its specialization seating, so it's going to have more mobility because that's Commander Pilot, and it's going to Commander Intel, and it's another Starship trait. I just nicknamed it a Pilot's Life for me. And that's the ability reroute reserves to weapons, which is a pilot ability, for it to be increased by 5 seconds as well. For its hull and shields, kind of in line with what you would kind of expect from a starship of this speed. Pretty similar, honestly, to a lot of the pilot escorts from the Sea Store, but in terms of a lot of stuff that this ship is doing. So yeah, very straightforward ship. Nothing super spectacular about her, but a fun ship nonetheless. Now, obviously, the Talara, as I just mentioned a little earlier, this ship, I felt I needed to change its specials, or its subtype. It was a science carrier. I decided to change this to a science dreadnought. Which does mean that it loses that extra hangar bay, so it only has 1 hangar bay instead of 2, but it would give it access to an extra weapon, and it would give it access to a secondary deflector, which it wouldn't have had before. So from a DPS standpoint, from your hangar pets, it would be a nerf, obviously, but you would get access to a secondary deflector, so you could actually do real science damage with this ship. And you get a pretty sizable DPS enhancement just from that secondary deflector available to you. I mean, it is a different subtype. It is supposed to function differently. So I think this layout that I've had here with Commander Temper Operative and Lieutenant Intel, I think works pretty well for the ship. I did adjust the base hull and shield ratio a little bit, but not too much. And as for the Starship, I thought would be cool with this ship. I call it mining to the core. In which your projectiles would get additional hull and shield penetration based upon how many damage over times you had going on from your ship. Up to a maximum of, if you had 10 extra damage over times, you would have 10 of whatever multiplier of extra hull and shield pen you would get for your torpedoes, to make it so that if you had extra side torps, that those things would be able to penetrate even better fighting against enemies. Now for this ship, unlike the other warbirds, because Federation captains cannot fly D7s, it's, to my understanding, it's something that Studios has in their agreement with CBS that they cannot let Federation ships fly D7s. This is going to be the only ship in this Romulan Anniversary Bundle that Federation captains cannot fly. However, for all Klingon captains, Klingon allied Romulans, Klingon allied Dominion, as well as all Romulan captains in general, including Federation allied Romulans, they would be able to fly this ship, which would make it cool. It'd make it so that Federation allied Romulans can actually fly a D7 inside this game. This would be a D7 warbird, not a D7 battlecruiser, but an actual D7 warbird. Because as we know in the episode The Enterprise Incident from TOS, Romulans, at least for a short time, had access to D7s during the canonical timeline. So I think it would be cool to, actually have an actual proper D7 warbird inside of this game, and yeah, do some cool stuff with it. You would, for its variant skin, you could just have that that Romulan bird art that you see at the bottom of a lot of Romulan ships. Make that as an option for all D7s inside the game, so that if you're gonna fly D7, you could have that as an option available to you. As for its bridge offer seating, as I've said in a different Dream Starship video, I really want a Starship with 3 commander seats, and for there actually be a reason to have 3 commander seats. And that's why I thought about this trait. which I'm calling strength in diversity, in which if you happen to have all of your assigned bridge officers for space, have every single one of their traits be different and have none of their traits repeat, that you'd be able to apply all of your ground traits to your stats on your starship itself. And I think that'd be pretty cool. Right now, most ground traits are completely ignored inside the game, especially when it comes to space. So being able to say that, yeah, if I have all my bridge officers have different traits, entirely different traits, and some of those traits in ground are actually decent, well, boom, then I might be able to actually supersede a full starship of 5 superior Romulan operatives in terms of raw damage and stats coming from my bridge officers. Now, to make this work easier, if you have lower amounts of seeding, this can actually allow this trait to be even better because it's a lot less cumbersome to get those powerful bridge officers. You only have to worry about 3 different lists of traits instead of 4 to 5 different traits, and trying to make sure that you're not repeating any traits among those different officers. It's just a thought that I had. Another one of those cool fringe starship trait things that I think could make a lot more bridge officers more interesting to put into your bridge officer seating layout overall. Whether it's actually super strong or not, well, that depends upon, you know, if Cryptic lets this exist and all inside the game. But that's just me. As for the new stuff from this, because this would honestly be a new ship and not one that's based upon the TOS D7 from promo packs, you know, it kind of is. Its new starship trait would be something that would buff gravimetric conversion and shared fate from the temporal operative specialization. I don't really see those in temporal operative builds really, so it'd be cool to have something to buff those. And then just a console that would enhance the cloak on your starship. If it's just a regular cloak, it becomes a battle cloak, and if it's a battle cloak, it becomes an enhanced battle cloak. Kind of like in the same way that the regular cloaking device for the Defiant, for instance, gives it a cloak because it doesn't have one normally. But yeah, this is just my thoughts for that. And then, of course, lastly, we can't have a legendary Romulan bundle without the Talus. As we know from Star Trek Picard, the Talus is known as the Romulan bird of prey. So I think it's only fitting to make the legendary Talus an actual Romulan bird of prey, and have it actually be a bird of prey, you know, raider. So it's going to have one less weapon, but it's going to have access to raider flanking. And as for its bridge officer, it's going to be a command starship because the Talus naturally gets an enhanced battle cloak. So being able to enhance its torpedoes that it can fire from cloak just makes sense in my mind. And it's got higher maneuverability because it's going to be, you know, a faster, lighter starship. Now, its starship type Cloaked Terror is what I decided to invent here. Makes it so that if your ship happens to have an enhanced battle cloak and you slot this trait, you'll not be able to use all abilities and all weapons without any restrictions while you are cloaked. So if you combine this with the Burrell trait, you could have a very menacing battle cloaking starship inside of the game, especially for torpedo builds. But if you combine them both, you can basically do it for all DPS types. I really want cloaks to actually become a real legitimate option in terms of doing damage inside this game. Besides, you know, just a little bit of extra burst damage at the beginning of a fight. Like, I mean, for me, for instance, for a couple of my starships, I like to have cloaks on them just so that, you know, as a tank captain, that I can get some extra bonus damage at the beginning of the fight to get that threat initially on me, while, you know, my traits like History Will Remember and Honor Den are starting to stack up, you know, to allow me to get that threat while the threat from those other traits might not necessarily be as strong in that realm. But anyway, I hope that cloaking becomes a viable thing in the future instead of just a more fringe fun thing. But who knows? We'll go ahead and see. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe if you like this type of content. I do try to put out videos every Monday now. I do try to record on Saturdays or, you know, Sundays depending, so that it's able to come out on Monday morning for you all, or Monday afternoon. I think it's Monday. Yeah, Monday afternoon about 5 p.m. CST. But yeah, Again, I do have other stuff upcoming. Feel free to check Facebook as well if you want to know the specific names of different videos that are going to be upcoming. And of course, the Google Drive to see the PDFs of different presentations that I've done here, as well as presentations of some things that I never actually went ahead and recorded, but I still made the content of anyway. Thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your week. And seriously, just especially with all the stuff spreading throughout the world, be safe and be healthy. Bye for now.